Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to what is a Zoom meeting. We were going to have a webinar style, but this is a Zoom meeting, and we're going to be running it as a Zoom meeting where people can make contributions after our two main speakers have made their introductions. Could I ask you, first of all, everybody who's on the call, to try and remain on mute, and if you have any questions, to submit them through the chat, and we'll try and get through as many as we possibly can once the speakers have finished their presentations. My name is Tony Burke. I'm an official of Unite the Union, and I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. Now, comrades, each of our speakers will speak for around about 15 minutes each, and then we'll take some general questions. I appreciate that the meeting is planned to go through to around about 8 o'clock. All being well, we might be able to finish a little bit early because we want everybody to have an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have got anything that you want to ask, just send it into the chat and we'll pick them from here. And I see we've been joined by Giselle, the Nicaragua ambassador, as well. So that's very pleasing to see you, Giselle, again. And I want to say that on the housekeeping, it's like as a normal Zoom meeting. You can zoom into one of the main speakers if you want, and if you want to just keep it as it is, that's absolutely fine. We are recording. And if you have any problems with your own kit, please feel free to notify us. Now, comrades, since 2007, Nicaragua has undergone a remarkable transformation in terms of social and economic progress and poverty reduction. Following 16 years of neoliberal government from 1990 to 2006, the country has seen the implementation of a raft of policies which aim to benefit the poorest and most vulnerable in society. I think that you will know that health and education are free, poverty and extreme poverty have been more than halved, and Nicaragua is also one of only 38 countries to have achieved the Millennium Development Goal of halving malnutrition. This webinar will look back at the country the Sandinistas government inherited, and the many obstacles they faced, and the progress made in achieving these goals. Starting with an overview this evening, the meeting will then focus on what government policies and programs have meant for rural small-scale producers, cooperatives, associations, and the country's capacity to grow its own food. So with the two speakers we've got tonight, we were due to have our comrade Colleen, but has had to drop out because her mum is very poorly. But we're very thankful that Becca Mohally Renk has kindly agreed to step in at very, very short notice to replace Colleen. Becca has lived in Nicaragua for 20 years, working with the Jubilee House Community and its project, the Center for Development in Central Africa, in just outside of Managua. So Becca, you're very, very welcome, and thank you very much for stepping in at the last minute. And I'll ask you to lead off for us. We're going to see if we can keep it to about 15 minutes. That would be good. And then we'll Nikki will follow and we'll take some questions. So over to you, Becca, and anybody that's got any questions, put them in the chat for us. Thank you. Becca?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me all right? And can you see the screen share? Good. Okay. So I'm very pleased to be here with you today to talk about all the advances in Nicaragua. As Tony said, I've been in Nicaragua for 20 years. I'm originally from Idaho in the US. Together with my Irish husband, I have two teenage daughters, aged 14 and 15, who were born in Nicaragua and have attended public school since the age of 3. They're now finishing 9th and 10th grades. I've worked all the time I've been in Nicaragua with the Center for Development in Central America, a project of the US-based nonprofit Jubilee House Community, which was founded 40 years ago in North Carolina to serve the poor and has worked in sustainable community development in Nicaragua since 1994. In our work, we work with sustainable agriculture with organic farmers, sustainable economic development with cooperatives, education, and healthcare. So I have a wide range of experience where I've seen personally the changes over the last 14 years in Nicaragua. I'll be talking to you today about these advances since the Sandinista government has been back in power. To understand what these advances mean to regular Nicaraguans like those with whom I work, I'd like to describe for you what Nicaragua was like under the 16 years of neoliberal government. When I first came to Ciudad Sandino in 1999, which is a city of 180,000 people located just outside Managua, Hurricane Mitch had recently created 2.7 million homeless people in Nicaragua and Honduras. The neoliberal government had pocketed what aid came into the country, and refugees were living in black plastic in muddy fields. Ciudad Sandino had received 12,000 of these refugees who were in bad conditions. But to be honest, those who've been living in Ciudad Sandino for decades weren't in much better shape. Everyone lived in houses with scrap wood or old pieces of zinc and plastic. There was only one paved road in the city. Most neighborhoods had only sporadic access to water. The city had no sewage system. And even in most urban areas, most people weren't connected to the electrical grid with its frequent blackouts. The only hospital sat empty with no medicines or supplies. Children had to bring their own desks if they wanted to go to school, and they had to pay for their exams. If you saw Nicaragua in the neoliberal years, you know the truth of what I'm describing and the heartache of seeing that suffering firsthand. But you wouldn't recognize the Nicaragua of today. In just 14 years, extreme poverty, people living on less than $1.90 per day, has dropped more than 10%, and poverty has dropped by 23.4%. How has this been done? The Nicaraguan government has implemented a model of equitable, green, pro-poor economic and social development. Let me break down for you what this development has looked like and the results for Nicaragua. Unless otherwise noted, the statistics I'm giving are from Nicaragua's National Development Plan for 2022 through 2026, which was released in June of this year. First, in the area of healthcare. During neoliberal governments, the budget for medicines and materials was minimal. When doctors who are working at our clinic that our organization runs during the day took the night shift at the Hospitalito, which is what our little hospital in Ciudad Sandino is called, they had to turn sick people away because they didn't even have gloves to examine patients or medicine to treat a baby with fever. Every time I drove down the street, I was stopped by people begging for bus or taxi fare to get their sick family members to a hospital in Managua. There was no ambulance service. Patients needing surgery had to bring their own alcohol, gauze, and sutures. During these years, patients literally died on the street outside hospitals for lack of basic medical care. In contrast, today, the Hospitalito is a fully equipped hospital with general medicine, pediatrics, gynecology, psychology, and natural medicine. There's emergency care and admitted beds. There's a cataract surgery center, a maternal weight home, a physical therapy center, and a center for people with disabilities. Ciudad Sandino is just one city. Public healthcare has been revolutionized all over the country. The entire structure and culture of healthcare has changed, focusing on making families active participants in their own health, and relying heavily on a small army of workers doing everything from mosquito elimination to door-to-door vaccination to health promotion and education. In 2005, Nicaragua had 1,092 health units, the vast majority in deplorable conditions. Between 2007 and 2021, the largest public health infrastructure in Central America has been built, with a total of 1,565 health units. In 14 years, Nicaragua has built 21 hospitals new and remodeled 46 more. It has built or remodeled 1,259 medical posts, 192 health centers, and 178 maternity homes. In an effort to see patients who don't normally go to health centers, the Ministry of Health has also fully equipped 66 mobile health clinics. These are made from semi-trucks that have been confiscated in drug busts and converted into clinics. In 2020, these mobile clinics provided nearly 1.9 million consults. In the midst of the pandemic, MINSA rolled out the My Hospital in My Community program, which sees patients in neighborhood health fairs with orthopedists, cardiologists, gynecologists, urologists, and includes screening for prostate, breast, and cervical cancers. Patients are then referred to a specialist at a hospital for follow-up, where they're moved to the front of the line to lower their waiting times. Nicaragua has made a long-term financial investment in public health. It's one of the countries with the largest increase per capita in investment in health, increased from $32 in 2007 to $70 per person today. 60% of the annual budget goes to healthcare and education. In 14 years, the total number of healthcare workers employed in the public sector is up by 66%. Doctors are up by 123%. Free medical consultations are up by 329%. All this combined with the school lunch program, which guarantees a hot meal of beans and rice to 1.2 million primary school children daily, means that there has been a 45% reduction in chronic malnutrition for children under 5 and a 66% reduction in chronic malnutrition in children 6 to 12 years old. Increase in maternal wait homes by 212% has led to an 87% reduction in home births, a 70% reduction in maternal mortality rates, and a 61% reduction in infant mortality. Moving forward, Nicaragua plans to continue expansion, finishing 5 more new hospitals before the end of this year and building 12 more new by 2026. It's in this context of more than a decade of revolutionary changes to the health system that Nicaragua faced the coronavirus. When COVID-19 was declared as a pandemic, Nicaragua was already prepared by having a healthier, more resilient population with access to the best public health care in the region. Nicaragua has chosen to fight the pandemic on its own terms while keeping its schools, its borders, and its economy open, essential in a country where families survive on what they can earn each day. Nicaragua has learned to live with the virus, to continue life and work safely. Nicaragua's softer approach means the economy is in better shape than other countries in the region. Nicaragua was the only country in Central America to increase exports in 2020, and GDP growth is expected to be between 2.5 and 3.5% in 2021. Nicaragua's approach has also meant fewer COVID cases and deaths than any other country in the region. This chart shows figures from a Seattle-based Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, which says that because COVID deaths are underreported in all countries, numbers should be adjusted for excess deaths or those above the expected death rate. Even with excess deaths, you can see that Nicaragua's COVID deaths per capita are well below any other country in the region, let alone larger countries like the US and the UK, which you can see on the right-hand side. Nicaragua began vaccinating against COVID in March, but the rollout has been slow due to unequal vaccine distribution worldwide. So far, Nicaragua has vaccinated 525,000 people with the goal of vaccinating 1 million by October 9th. Although there was initially some vaccine hesitancy in the older population, as we experience a second wave now, demand has risen. This week, the eligible age was lowered to 30 years old, and people have been queuing up around the country to get jabbed. Everyone reports good spirits and order despite long lines. Moving on to advances in education. In 2003, the average Nicaraguan had 3.5 years of schooling. For those who did go to school, there were fees for everything. When parents couldn't pay the costs, children couldn't sit exams and couldn't pass the year. Only 30% of those starting first grade were expected to finish sixth grade. When the FSLN came into office in 2007, the government ended all school fees. Nicaraguans can get preschool through university education for free. Since then, Nicaragua has increased education spending by 381%, renovated or built new nearly 35,400 schools, added nearly 30% more teachers, and is feeding 1.2 million school children a hot meal each day. Before, the choice many parents had was to send your child to school or send them to the stoplight so they could beg to eat. Now, when children eat at school for free, the choice is simple. This is why you don't see many children begging at stoplights in the cities anymore. Additionally, the government provides students with new backpacks loaded with school supplies, over 5.7 million of them since 2007. My own children received these backpacks during their primary school education. So what are the results of this investment? Youth with no schooling at all has dropped from 24% to 4%. Rates for passing primary and secondary grades have increased from 79 to 91%, and remarkably, the percentage of the population with a university degree has risen from 9% to 19%. Moving on to housing and land issues. Prior to 2007, the vast majority of Nicaraguans lived in crowded, substandard housing. Since then, the government has passed a law to incentivize construction of low-income housing and provide subsidies to make housing accessible, including direct subsidy for down payment and maximum of 3.5% annual interest on 10-year mortgages. The government has also additional dignified housing programs, such as the Bismarck-Martinez program, where houses cost $1,500 paid over 6 years with payments of $20 per month. Prior to 2007, property titles in Nicaragua were a mess. Most poor people did not have a clear title to their land or their home. The government has been working to legalize homes in rural land and urban areas with an emphasis on women heads of household. In the past 14 years, these programs have resulted in construction and improvements on 122,122 low-income houses, delivery of 25,820 Bismarck-Martinez houses, and delivery of 427,434 land titles. Additionally, an area equal to 31% of Nicaragua's national territory has been deeded to indigenous communities in non-transferable legal land titles, benefiting 200,000 people in 314 communities. Since 2007, Nicaragua has created a national system of protected areas, which now represents 25.5% of the national territory, with an area of 3.3 million hectares made up of 72 protected areas. Additionally, programs have reforested 32,000 hectares. In advances in basic services, let's start with electricity. In 2007, there were unannounced rolling blackouts of up to 12 hours per day, which wrought havoc on the productivity in every area. The sewing cooperative we worked with at the time had to invest thousands of dollars in a generator just to stay competitive. At that time, 80% of Nicaragua's energy was generated from oil, and just over half the country was connected to the grid. 14 years ago in my village, my neighbors brought electricity from a nearby well to their homes using barbed wire. In most houses, there was barely enough electricity to turn on a light bulb. The electrical grid has now been extended to all houses in our village, and my neighbors have televisions, refrigerators, and shops selling food, ice, and cool drinks. Additionally, 80% of the population has low consumption of electricity and receives a subsidy to cover 45% of their electric bill. Electrical coverage has gone from 54% to 99%. In 2007, Nicaragua's electricity was sourced at only 26% renewable. Today, with a huge investment in wind, biomass, geothermal, solar, and hydroelectric, more than 80% of Nicaragua's electricity is produced using renewable resources. Since 2007, 38 million barrels of oil have been saved thanks to this switch. Now for potable water, the most fundamental of basic services. In 2007, it reached little of the population. In my own village, we had to haul water by horse cart and ration what we used for cooking, drinking, bathing, and washing. It was impossible to have a garden because you couldn't water it, and only limited livestock was possible. Since then, community potable water and sanitation committees have been created. These are autonomous committees that administer wells and water distribution with technical support from rural municipalities. Our village water system is run by such a committee, and we now have running water to 576 homes, and our family's water bill is less than half of what it used to be. Today, access to potable water in Nicaragua has risen from 65% of urban homes in 2007 to 92%. Access in rural areas has gone from 28% to 55%, and 3,127 community water committees have been established. Access to sewage systems not only helps prevent diseases like diarrhea and cholera, but when there is no sewage system, used wash water runs in the streets, creating breeding grounds for mosquitoes that carry dengue, malaria, Zika, and chikungunya. Access to improved sewage systems has gone from 33% to 54% in urban areas and from 36% to 51% in rural areas. In infrastructure, Nicaragua now boasts the best roads in the region, having doubled the mileage of paved roads, paving nearly 2,000 kilometers of roads, repairing another 2,000 kilometers, building 120 kilometers of bridges and drainage systems as well. Vitally, these new roads connect the Caribbean coast to the Pacific side of Nicaragua in just an 8-hour drive. They connect rural farmers with markets and have increased national and international tourism. Improved roads sound superficial to some people, but in Ciudad Sandino, where we had only one paved road, we've seen how even the shortest improved road has changed lives. In addition to buses, moto taxis are a quick, economical way to get around now. Increased traffic leads to increased customers for micro businesses. Families have less mud and dust inside their houses and can even push a baby buggy easily down the street for the first time. Nicaragua has a lot of arable land and agriculture is its backbone, especially small farmers. But during the neoliberal years, cooperatives and small farmers were ignored and lacked access to credits. For those who could access commercial credit, thousands of small farmers lost their land to banks with total crop loss after Hurricane Mitch in 1998. Since 2007, $548 million has been given in credits to small farmers, attending around 25,700 farmers per year, many of whom are women. Farmers are given training in new varieties and farming techniques, as well as seeds, starts, and tools. This is my daughter helping hand out production packages in our community last week. Support has also been given to cooperatives, giving important stability to small farmers. Since 2007, nearly 318,000 members have been inducted into 5,900 new cooperatives. The results of this work are that Nicaragua now produces 90% of the food in the country, a very high level of food security, which is vital. The Nicaraguan government also put particular emphasis on creative economy, focusing on micro and small business, which accounts for 70% of employment. Since 2007, 23,345 micro and small businesses have been formalized, meaning those workers are now in the Social Security system, they're paid benefits, and will be eligible for a pension. The government has streamlined the process to make it easy and provides ongoing training in areas for the creative economy with a focus on women. 3.5 million women have taken free courses, internships, workshops, and seminars to strengthen their skills. In the past 14 years, the government has sponsored 32,552 fairs and where micro and small businesses have opportunities to sell products without having to pay for space, and 144 municipal markets have been built. Public school curriculum now includes a class on entrepreneurship and learning how to run a small business. A microcredit program for women has been established called Zero Usury. This program is important because in 2007, private microcredit institutions were largely unregulated and charged on average 41% annual interest. Zero Usury has given credits to over 800,000 women, loaning $18 million a year on an average of 5% annual interest. Successful groups are then encouraged to form cooperatives in order to give work to more women. Since 2007, nearly 300 women's cooperatives have been formed. Through these and other programs which target women, the situation for women has improved drastically in Nicaragua. There are new laws in place to protect women from violence, and 60 women's police stations have reopened. These are by and for women to make it easier for women to file complaints for aggression, threats, or attempts to undermine their dignity in their life. This year, a class was added to secondary school curriculum called The Dignity and Rights of Women. Currently, 55.7% of women in Nicaragua participate in the job market or carry out some form of paid work, placing it as the country in Latin America and the Caribbean with the highest participation of women in the workforce. In all aspects of gender equality, Nicaragua is exemplary. According to the Global Gender Gap Report, in overall gender equality, Nicaragua has gone from 62 out of 153 countries in 2006 to number 5 worldwide, reducing the gender gap by over 80% in just 14 years. In women's health and survival, Nicaragua is number 1 in the world. In women's educational attainment, Nicaragua is number 1 in the world. In women cabinet ministers, Nicaragua is number 1 in the world. Nearly 59% of all cabinet members are women. Not only are women better off now, but so are families. Recreational opportunities for families were once few and far between, but now every municipality has safe, cheap options. 772 parks have been built, and 207 of them have free Wi-Fi access. 1,340 sports facilities have been built, 59 museums and 59 cultural centers have been built. For youth, dance, culture, and art schools with free classes have been installed in all 153 municipalities in the country. Additionally, Nicaragua's largely unarmed police force works with young people to promote a culture of peace, which includes home visits to at-risk youth, community counseling sessions, organizing and running sports programs, teaching vocational classes, technical training, GED programs, and even financing startup businesses together with at-risk youth. In terms of security, Nicaragua has the lowest homicide rate in Central America, and efforts to neutralize organized crime, gangs, and drug cartels have been very successful. In fact, as you can see, in the last 14 years, Nicaragua has become an example that the whole world urgently needs to follow, a model of equitable, green, pro-poor development. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Becca. That was absolutely excellent and full of fantastic information, a great presentation. And hopefully we'll be able to post those slides onto us, because I think that they can be very useful for those of us in the conference season coming up, and later on in the year, when we can share that information. Well, comrades, that was excellent. And the next speaker, Nick Hoskyns. Nick has worked in rural cooperatives since visiting Nicaragua on a 1988 Solidarity Brigade. For the past 20 years, he's worked with an ethical trading company called Ético, I think that is Nick, owned by cooperatives and charities. And it facilitates fair trade relationships between small scale producers and international markets for products such as sesame and for coffee. Nick, you're very welcome. And could you address the meeting and obviously give us your take on what has been going on? Thank you, Nick.
Well, thanks, Tony, and thanks, Becca. What a presentation! I mean, just as we were in the preamble, I asked if there were going to be some facts and figures in her presentation, and she actually covered the full range. And you know, it makes me proud to be sat here in Leon, Nicaragua, on my small organic farm where we live with our family. And as Tony said, I first came here in 1988 in a solidarity brigade to a small community called Lagartillo, which I'll actually refer to again right at the end, because Nicaragua, for so many of us, has been a place of opportunity. And from Becky's presentation, obviously she and her family have a wonderful time here, as so many of us do. And I just want to reference, we came, you know, I came here in the 80s, and Nicaragua had a revolution in 1979. And the important thing about the revolution was it was absolute profound change, where the land was redistributed to the poor. The army and the police force were changed from the repressive forces that they were, and they became really the police force and the army of the people, and the whole constitution was changed. It was a revolution. And I think that's important to say when, you know, when you hear of these incredible gains and some of the things I'm going to talk about, you know, a lot of this is not possible everywhere in the world, where, you know, the interests are very powerful, and it's not easy to achieve what, you know, Becky just presented. I'm going to talk from a perspective of the social economy, and that, of course, you know, the small farmers, if you haven't got any land, you're not a very effective small farmer. You know, so from the land reform, the Nicaraguans have had access to the land. And if you don't own the land, because it's available, you are able to rent places to plant. And, you know, the transport system is a cooperative system. So the taxis are mainly one family-owned taxi. The buses are cooperatives as well, where people own their buses. And so just to give a feel of what the social economy is, and now as sort of a lot of those photographs that Becky presented, you know, now there's a sort of explosion of this social economy as small business, through the recent crises, small business are popping up everywhere. And this is what I want to get to. I want to get to the government policy and the way the government's run is supporting the poorest, programs for the poorest, all those things you heard about, and giving the poorest from there the chance to, you know, to move up, to develop, and to create their small businesses. So, you know, at the moment in the evenings, our family go to the local park, which over the last few years has turned into an absolute hive of activity, with trampolines for the children to play on, with all the different foods that can be offered, and everyone goes there. And that is all small businesses which are allowed to just set up. And the rule is, as long as you're not interfering with anybody else, then you will be allowed to run your small business. If you set up a small sales point on the side of the road, or if you do up a bicycle. I mean, you said, Becky put the motor taxis, but actually the vast majority are bicycle taxis and little things to move goods around from the markets, and there's just a hive, and the markets are incredible. Nicaragua has the largest market in Central America, the most dynamic, which is the Oriental market. And it's a phenomenon. It's an absolute incredible place where you can get everything, and loads of businesses done by all of these small, medium, and then quite large businesses. And it's just wonderful to live in a country that isn't run for big business. And I just want to pause there a little bit, you know, just to reflect, because a lot of the success of the Nicaraguan government, I argue, is the success of the Nicaraguan people and their innovation, their ability to get on, to survive, to be successful. And I don't think Nicaraguans are unique. I think that, you know, economies and countries run, even if it's a level playing field, giving people a chance to do stuff, then the people will respond. And so I want to talk about the successes in that framework. And so, you know, I've been privileged to work with small farmer cooperatives and be, you know, one of the team who works on developing markets and selling and looking for things. And we worked with Sesame was the first product I worked with. And we have developed sesame oil in a small village where the production of the oil is done at the village level with the cooperative. And so in this context, those small farmers who are producing the sesame have free education, have free healthcare. They now have secondary education in their communities, not having to travel a long way. They have many programs to support their production directly from government. So, of course, within that framework, it's much easier for a cooperative to be successful. And within that framework, the cooperative has become one of the largest companies in the village, one of the largest employers, and has been an innovator in the world. It innovated fair trade sesame. It was the first fair trade sesame in the world. And now, and Becky talked about gender and the incredible, you know, achievements in gender at a national and in the cabinet but in the grassroots, and anyone who's been in Nicaragua knows the strength and power of Nicaraguan women. And I would again say that has something to do with the revolution that happened in Nicaragua, which in a lot of ways liberated women from a lot of the historical restrictions they may have felt. But what we've done is we've developed the recognition of unpaid work for women in Sesame Oil. This cooperative that is innovating worked with its clients, in this case, the Body Shop and L'Oreal, and developed the recognition of the costs that we never calculated in fair trade, the unseen costs of the women and family. We managed to put a value on it, and we managed to start a women's empowerment program, which is now starting to bear fruit in coffee, in other products, and is making its way through, just like fair trade did, to become something that's talked about, and hopefully, in this time when we need new ideas, those resources put in the hands of women, and in the case of a Chopper, there are 100 women being trained up in lots of courses which they choose. They then become small businesses. Fiona Woolf, the then Lord Mayor of the City of London, visited a Chopper. I won't go into why she turned up in a Chopper, but she visited. And when she met those women in the cooperative, the incredible conclusion she came up with is, this is exactly what the City of London needs. What she was most impressed by was the majority of those women were very successful pig farmers, and they were getting the meal from the sesame oil. They got a good deal in sesame meal. They'd been supported by the cooperative to get their pigs, have the basic infrastructure, and they were all doing very, very well. And she said that is exactly what the City of London needed, was you know, for innovative women to be given the chance and to push business forward. And I sincerely think, you know, she's right. And that's a little bit the argument I want to make with Nicaragua, is this model where it's unique and original, the Nicaragua model. It always has been. And one of the reasons it's unique is because it's always had to confront the most powerful nation in the world. And when you talk about Nicaragua, I know many of you will know this, but Nicaragua has been at the butt of US aggression from the time it was brave enough to have its revolution. The neighboring countries didn't achieve their revolutions, mainly because of the success and the danger of the good example of Nicaragua, which, you know, we're seeing today. But that aggression hasn't stopped. But that having to constantly, you know, stand up to US aggression makes life very complicated, but also creates lots of opportunities and keeps, you know, the whole country and people fighting fit to come up with innovations and alternatives to survive. So that's just, and I think that's why Nicaragua has come up with so many innovations and examples over the years. And I think that is why, you know, there is that real danger of the good example. And so in coffee, the small farmers, again, you know, they own their own farms. They have small coffee farms. The incredible thing is there you missed the green revolution in coffee, which because of the US blockade. And so a lot of the original varietals of coffee are still there on the farms. There's a very large production of organic coffee because of the lack of the agriculture intensification programs which happened during the Green Revolution. And so Nicaragua, with its cooperatives, pioneered specialty coffee, and we were part of that, building cupping labs with the cooperatives. And I'm not going to go into too much, but the price and the value of Nicaraguan coffee and the pride with which the Nicaraguan farmers produce their coffee has gone right up, and that now is being taken on by the government in all of their adult education programs, which are absolutely many. I mean, Becky referred to them. They're teaching farmers' children to be cuppers, to work in processing plants, to be agronomists, and you know, so it's really heading up, and it's not. And the thing is, the driving force, I think, in Nicaragua is the small farmers, is the revolution, but the large farmers also benefit from that. So the large farmers are also producing, getting better prices for their coffee. They're now worried about quality, and they don't want to, you know, I wouldn't say they're the best. I think the small farmers and the cooperatives are the best, but the large farmers definitely don't want to be the worst. And so they're also trying to show how sustainable they are on their farms. And if you look at Nicaraguan coffee, you really see sustainability. This whole economy makes the whole country resilient. I mean, through all of the crisis, people don't go hungry in Nicaragua. I don't know how much how many of you know about what happened in 2018, where there were barricades and everything got blocked up. And, you know, but between the barricades, you have two families making tortillas, cooking up beans. You've got little pulperias, little shops, you know, and so the small farmers produce more beans and corn through the crisis, because that's what the small farmers do, is when there's a crisis, they go out and plant more because they don't know because you're a bit unsure about the future. And so Nicaragua really has it now in exports, and the government supports that, and they have a really wonderful policy, which is when basic foodstuffs which the population needs start to go up in price, they've got a solidarity sales initiative. So if the beans price starts to go up too high, because there's been a lot of export, because Nicaragua produces enough, is completely self-sustainable in beans, but they also export. There's a free market, and if there's a good price, they can be exported. They go out and sell beans at a lower price. So there are initiatives it's not regulation, but it's going into the market and making sure that the market doesn't really go against the poor. I think I must be going on a little bit. Am I, Tony? Should I start to wind up?
Nick, if you can sum up, I've got a big clock on here. You've got another couple of minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So yeah. So just examples of what we're involved in. I mean, Nicaragua's an amazing environmental opportunity. Our Sesame plant, of their own accord, the cooperative has put loads of solar panels on the roof and are looking how to make their whole supply chain as clean as possible. In honey's amazing. Nicaraguan honey flies through. We export the honey from the small farmers and the cooperatives, and the buyers absolutely love it. Because it's polyflor. So a honey company, instead of making a blend of honey, they're buying honey where the bee has done the blend. It's the bee who has gone to all the different flowers and found their perfect blend. And of course, bees are much better in honey than people are. So that's one wonderful thing. And then the second thing is, because sadly, honey is full of people who do blending and cheating, and Nicaragua flies through the pesticide tests and the tests of any mixing. And that is because that's an indication, you know, they say that bees are an indication. That is an indication of the way the environment in Nicaragua is and the potential it has. And just going back to that, just to finish, you know, Nicaragua is a key moment. You know, the government has been really successful. We expect that the Sandinistas are going to win these elections, all the opinion polls and everything. It's more about the legitimacy of Nicaragua and the legitimacy of all the process, which is where Nicaragua is now being attacked. And that community I told you about, Lagartillo, is incredible. I mean, that is it's just a wonderful place. It educated me. But there you've got a Spanish school. You have got a lot of the people work. They've got a secondary school there now, so you have all the teachers working there. You have a music group. You have a theatre group that goes around the country doing theatre. I mean, it's an incredible place, and it's rural Nicaragua at its best. And there was a song written there, Sovereignty, and it was written about 12, 13 years ago. And that little music group and the author Roger Osorio have now become famous because that song about sovereignty just became, you know, it was exactly what people needed to hear at the right time. You can soberanía it is, if you want to listen to it, and you'll see it if you Google it. So that is the time we're at in Nicaragua. Thanks, Becky, for taking the pressure off me with that amazing presentation. And I hope I've been able to give, you know, a bit of a feel about what it is. The government has, the idea is social programs which support production with the small guys. And, you know, it's incredible. It's free education, it's free health, it's support for people with what they need. And then, of course, those people with the majority of their needs covered can go and be successful in business, successful in life, and have lots of fun. So those of you who are thinking of coming to Nicaragua, we're still having fun here, even despite everything we're going through with coronavirus. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. That was, again, fantastic contribution. Learned a hell of a lot there. And I think that everybody on the call this evening will have been amazed at this information about the transformation that has taken place in the country. And I think it'll be at some point, hopefully when the pandemic dies down, we get an opportunity to come and see you over there and see how well this actually works. Now, comrades, I've got a question, really good question here in the chat box from Helen Yule. And this is to both our contributors, and it goes right to the heart of some of the matter that you've talked about. So the question is from Helen is, how would you respond to corporate media and opposition supporters who operate in an echo chamber internationally of denunciations of the governments for human rights abuses, and that Daniel Ortega is a dictator? Now, that's a complex question, and I'm sure you'll be able to answer it and fully, the points that are being raised there. So I'm going to kick off, and Becca, thank you for your earlier contribution. Do you want to lead off on this one, and then I'll hand over to Nick? Comrades,
it looks like Nick is ready to answer. He's got his hand up. Go for it. You start off, Nick.
Hang on. Don't forget, anybody else wants to ask a question, put it in the chat for us. So go on then. I've been overruled. Nick?
Yeah, no, you've been all right, but you're right, Tony, because in gender, you know, the great thing is that women are leading in Nicaragua. So, but on this one, I just want to say, I'm not going to answer absolutely directly.
No,
I want to say that. No, I want to say this. On Saturday, there was an incredible meeting in Mexico. I don't know how many presidents were there, 20 at least. It was the meeting of the CELAC, the Community of Latin American States, which is an amazing organization that was set up to maybe replace at some time the Organization of American States. The only difference between the Organization of American States and CELAC is that in CELAC, you don't have the US and Canada. And in the Organization of American States, of course, it's all manipulated by the US as they do. Now, this meeting happened on Saturday. I was following it a bit. Last minute, big news, Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, announced he was arriving as he was on the runway, that he was a surprise person to come to this event. Nicaragua made a big statement at that conference saying they would not support Argentina in the future presidency. They made a big thing about it. They made a great statement and said, because Argentina has been the voice person for the and they're not going to support them. You know, any Latin American country that's a puppet of the US, we're not going to support. And then even bigger news happened at the end when the final address was given by the president of China, not the president of the US, not the European Union, but the president of China. It was an incredible event. So there I go, and you can all Google it, CELAC, Mexico, on the BBC. And you know where the last reference to CELAC is? 2014. I go on to The Guardian, Google it now. You can Google it now. You can Google this thing. You can look on YouTube. You'll see all the excitement about Maduro. And then you go on to and I'm talking about the UK. I don't know if everyone's from the UK here, but these are our trusted channels of communication. So what my answer to Helen is, it's just sadly on Latin America and especially Nicaragua, it's very difficult to trust what we're reading. And so you've seen these presentations and we've got, there's an effort with the Nicaraguan Solidarity Campaign, which I'm involved in, where we're trying to get volunteer young people to write articles and get news out there. But what do you do? What do you do when there is such an incredible control and manipulation of the media? And there's the example. I mean, those of you can Google it. If I'm wrong, put it on the chat. You know, if it really was reported, or if it wasn't important news that 20 presidents turn up and they all have an exciting meeting. And then you look at the other stories about Latin America that are completely irrelevant, and you think, oh my God. But anyway, so I don't know if I've answered the question. I like Becky. Becky's much better. She does good answers, but I've given my answer just for people to because it is difficult to argue against the BBC and the Guardian for me, because we're a left-wing UK-based family, and we have a very, very deep tendency to trust, you know, what's presented to us. So that is my answer, okay. Tony. I'll hand over.
Thank you, Nick. And Becca, would you want to respond?
Sure. I just would like to say that I think for those of us on the left, as Nicolas has said, who trust, you know, the left, the progressive media, it's important for us to know that this is not by accident. It's not just an omission that the good news coming out of Nicaragua is being left out. This is a campaign. The United States is very actively trying to destabilize Nicaragua, and that's why we don't hear this good news. So for those who say, well, I'm reading something else in The Guardian, I'm reading something else in the New York Times or the Washington Post or on BBC, that's on purpose. Those media outlets and even some of the more progressive media outlets are being manipulated. And so it is important to dig deeper and to understand that that's not what's going on. And I think if you can't come to Nicaragua yourself, which a lot of people can't travel right now, talk to someone who has been here, and you will find that people who are saying it's a dictatorship in general are not here in Nicaragua, and they're not watching what's going on. And if they're still in Nicaragua saying it's a dictatorship, then they don't talk to the people that Nick and I work with on a day-to-day basis, because they certainly are not saying that it's a dictatorship. So I think it's important to get the news from the source rather than to trust other sources.
Yes, I totally concur with both Becca and Nick on this. I'm old enough to remember America having an undeclared war in Nicaragua for many, many years, and what was going on down there. So there are a number of other quick points I want to pick up that people have posted, and then there'll be a question. First of all, Fiona says she stopped a subscription to The Guardian over their reporting of Nicaragua and a blind following of US nonsense. And Matthew Lang has said it's really good to hear all the progress that's been made there, and empowering and supporting people on the ground despite the obstacles. And he has very fond memories of an NSC study tour in 2002. I should also say, and it's not slipped my mind, but I came from the Printers Union in the UK, and one of the important things was we did a lot of work of solidarity in Latin America. We actually sent over a delegation to Nicaragua many years ago, and it was a tremendous success. So we have good links. Now, the question that we've got that I need to pose to you both is from Francis, who says there were great presentations, but can you think of any flaws, Becca and Nick, in the Nicaragua strategy, and any aspects where they could have some form of improvement? So Becca and then Nick.
Yeah, you know, nothing is perfect. I think that, you know, an easy answer would be to say, surely if Nicaragua had access to more money, then they could do everything a whole lot better. The other would be, you know, access to a bit more time as well. I think that Daniel Ortega in the 1980s said if Nicaragua could just have 10 years of peace, what we could accomplish. And actually we saw between 2007 and 2017 what was accomplished in 10 years of peace. It's pretty amazing. So those are two aspects. I think that if you take a look at, if you read Spanish, I would encourage you to dig deep into that National Development Plan. It is so well laid out. It is so well thought out. It's exactly the kind of plan that I would love to see in my home country. But I think that any plan like that, when you look at the macro level nationwide, it's well thought out, and the philosophy behind it is great. What happens sometimes when those plans get implemented on the ground is that things don't get implemented the way they're intended. So for example, I would say that the class that my daughters are now receiving on a new class on the rights and dignity of women, great idea. And there's been some content been passed down to the teachers, but at this individual school level, individual principals and directors of the schools deal with it differently. They sometimes give that class to whoever has less classes. So we'll give it to the PE teacher who hasn't necessarily been trained in this, or someone who doesn't have a good idea. The education right now, the curriculum has been changed drastically, and the training is happening for teachers. But I think we'll really see some fundamental changes in education when the next generation of teachers comes in, because some of the older generation have the older ways of doing things. So the implementation doesn't always match with what the intention is. And that's where I would say there's some weakness. And of course, that's bound to happen when you're looking at doing this as a national level.
Yeah, thank you, Becca. And Nick?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, weakness. I mean, anyone who's been to Nicaragua, of course, will know immediately that everything's not perfect, and actually, it's not supposed to be perfect. Things are done in a there are great sayings like you adjust your luggage on the way. You make things better as you go, and that pragmatism is one of the great strengths. But of course, is a weakness as well when we're always reacting to what's going on now. And what I want to say, the biggest weakness is very understandable, that when you have to confront the most powerful nation in the world, there's a lot of difficulties that come from that. And so the government, as you've seen, is incredibly, I mean, what a vote-winning presentation Becky did. They've touched all the buttons, and the government's got very, very good at winning democratic elections, and making everybody really feel what the government's doing. Now, that isn't my style. It isn't, I think, an old left style. So, where you want the people to feel empowered, and and that's why it's great. We work with the cooperatives who get in there and do their bit. But a lot of the things that we were doing as cooperatives, the government's come. We started off building roads as a solidarity group with the cooperative. We built schools. We then run these really successful adult education courses, and the government has come behind and is doing that for the whole country as the state. Now, I would say civil society, a less visible state would be better, but that is not the case when you have the US breathing down your neck, looking for any weaknesses that you have. And so there are a lot of weaknesses, but I sort of blame the antagonism against Nicaragua for Nicaragua having to, defend itself and be very, very proactive as a government and as a political party. So that would be my answer. But
thank you, Nick. Now then, let me just see these other chats in here. Let me see. Right, okay, a question from James Polk. I'd like to thank both speakers for fantastic presentations. And the question is, how much have sanctions hurt the economy so far? And how does the government manage to keep on pushing forward these progressive projects with access to funds limited by the NICA Act? And again, there's other comments here saying, fabulous event, thanks to everybody. And what a fantastic pair of speakers we've got. Let's do the question then. How has the government managed to keep on pushing forward with these projects with limited funds? Nick, and then Becca.
The sanctions are terrible. They come through finance. I mean, the way the US implements sanctions is through stricter and stricter and stricter rules through the banks, and says who's allowed to have accounts. So at the moment in Nicaragua, just so you get an idea of it, it's not all roses. And a cooperative finds it very difficult to open a bank account in Nicaragua at the moment because of the restrictions on the financial system. we, as Ético, when we pay a cooperative, the bank will often ask for loads of documentation of where it comes from. There's enormous restrictions on the way the country's moving, and this is cooperatives who are exporting honey, sesame, coffee, and so a lot of other businesses have been sanctioned directly in Nicaragua, and the government's been sanctioned. So I think that the president of the central bank, I think, has been sanctioned. So now he's not allowed to sign bank agreements with other banks. So they're attacking from the point of strength, which is finance. Now, the incredible thing in the history of Nicaragua is sometimes we come out the other end stronger. So at the moment, incredibly, Nicaragua has got more reserves than international reserves than it's ever had before. It's got more tax collection money than it's ever had before. And it's actually getting along without all these incredible multilateral loans. And it's, of course, not incredibly indebted. So, the sanctions, of course, have enormous effects. But then again, Nicaragua's never had. I mean, when has Nicaragua ever had access to money, except for in the period of neoliberal governments when it indebted itself and nothing was really achieved. And it's important to mention as well that Nicaragua in the neoliberal governments pardoned the debt with the US, which was the International Court of The Hague, said that the US had to pay God knows how many billion. I think at that time, when it was a lot of money, it was 10 billion. So, the sanctions really do have an effect, but there's always been aggression and sanctions against the government here. And so I think in some ways it can make you more resilient, and maybe lots of money would make the model a little bit less exciting and diverse.
Okay, Becca?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, that the economy, the biggest hit to the economy was actually the events of 2018 and the attempted coup in 2018. That has been reckoned, I think, to have affected Nicaragua the same as 52 Hurricane Eta and Iota, which we had last year. 2 Category 4 hurricanes hit Nicaragua. It's been worse than the pandemic. It's been worse than anything. And that really gave a huge blow to the economy. And so that has affected things even before the sanctions were put on the country. On a day-to-day where we're seeing the change in the economy and the sanctions, for example, the clinic that we run is having trouble getting reagents for our laboratory. Medicines are not coming in at the same time. Some medicines are not available anymore, and some are available only sporadically. We're seeing that with a lot of different imports, and that's really affecting the country, but in a smaller way. It's not a huge overall issue. I think if the Renacer Act is passed in the United States, that's additional sanctions, which will effectively sanction all members of the Sandinista party, which is more than 2 million Nicaraguans, as well as their family members. So that is going to be a much bigger issue if that happens. What we're seeing, though, from these sanctions is some hesitancy among businesses to do business with Nicaragua. And as Nick mentioned, banking issues and so forth. The way that Nicaragua has been able to continue even without this financing, because they did not receive more financing from the World Bank or from the IMF until the hurricanes hit. And then since then, some financing has come in. One of the main ways is that the Central American Bank for Economic Integration has continued working with Nicaragua and has done a great amount of financing. And there's been financing from other parts of the world. Also, you'll notice now that Nicaragua is doing a lot more business with Russia, is doing more business with Iran and with other countries around the world that are not allied with the United States, similar to what we saw in the 1980s. So I think that they will continue looking for other sources. They've done an amazing job. And at this stage, Nicaragua has a very good track record. All the reports from the multilateral institutions say that Nicaragua doesn't have corruption, that they do very efficient projects and very transparent projects. So I do think that some of that multilateral aid will continue, even despite sanctions, and that's been vital to Nicaragua. I will also just mention quickly that after the hurricanes, one of the things that that was so smart. Nicaragua had taken out climate insurance before the hurricanes. And so right after the hurricanes hit, Nicaragua was able to get a payout on that climate insurance that it had taken out. So it's been very smart in preparing for events that will affect it.
Okay, thank you very much, Becca. Now, I've got a couple more congratulatory notes here. So we got greetings from Masaya in Nicaragua, and apologies for arriving late, but it looks as though Becca and Nick have done a great job. And also a good comment here from Dave Cosgrove. He said it's a great event. Chamaro's character assassination of Daniel Ortega is available on the BBC World Service Hard Talk. And it's been there for over a year. Now, what Dave asks is, can we insist that the BBC broadcast a riposte for balance in light of the election this year? I'm sure that your comrades would want to answer that, but I think we pretty much know the answer. The problem with the BBC, 1 year old, they'll have forgotten all about it, but you might want to comment on that. And I've got a note here from Louise saying, where is it gone? It's gone now. It was here. Nick's mum is with you in Nicaragua, and Catherine Hoskyns. She would like to say a few words, Catherine would, and I wouldn't ask to bring her in, but she seems to be unmuted and will need to, seems to be muted and needs to unmute herself. So Nick, I'll leave it with you. Bring your mum in. Hi, Catherine. Come on in.
Hi. Hi. Oh, I just wanted to say that what I have noticed since I came last time was that they, well, it was something that Pedro Haslam, a deputy in the parliament here, told me, that after 1918, the economy went down very much. And one of the ways in which they revived it was that they made it legal that anybody could sell anything on the street or in any of the parks, and they could put up a puesto, a stall anywhere in Nicaragua, so long as it didn't stop traffic. And the result is the parks are absolutely full of little stalls of people selling food, mementos, everything. And it has boosted the economy. And I think that's a very simple way in which a government which is pro the people should try and boost the economy from the bottom, that it's the ordinary people who have come in and been able to sell, and not sort of subsidizing big business to bring in new jobs and things. That's my comment.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'm just going to go back to the chat. I'm trying to get them both on my phone here as well. Let me just see what we've got. Now, another comment. From Louise, who said, it would be great if more people could send in complaints to the BBC. Yes, wouldn't it? And to The Guardian when they put out such terrible stuff over and again. But she goes on to say, the Nicaragua Solidarity Campaign has sent in a number of complaints to the BBC, including the World Service Director, and we never, ever get a satisfactory response at all. I think that you can go back years, and as a trade union official, years, when we've complained about the way trade unions were treated many years ago, and complaints, and you get maybe a comment on Radio 4 in the middle of the night at some point. But comrades, it's now we're coming up to 20 to 8, and I'm going to say there was no more questions in the box, and I'm going to give both Becca and Nick just a few minutes, maybe 2 minutes, just to sum up, and then say thank you very much to everybody. And I've got some asks on my notes here for you all. So Becca, 2 or 3 minutes, and then Nick.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoy being here with you all this evening for you. I will just add on to what Catherine said, that in fact, the informal or the creative economy in Nicaragua is what's credited for pulling Nicaragua out of the economic slump after 2018. So that's a very good point.
Thank you, Becca. And Nick?
Yeah, no, I just like to, I mean, for the social economy, for the small guys, for the people, they not only have brought the economy out, but they also supported the economy during the crisis, because nobody ran out of beans, corn, the staples, the production was all there, and the small business are the ones who keep going. The big business tried to do a strike right in the moment of the crisis. Big business tried to also strike and bring the country to a standstill, and it had absolutely no effect, and all the small businesses just loved it and rose up, and that quickly stopped. And I think that's, I mean, my message, the thing about Nicaragua, it's great to look at Nicaragua, but I really do believe that if in London, and in all over the world, people were given a chance to actually, get out on the street and peddle their wares and do their thing and have land to farm on. Always when I'm driving around in the UK, I'm always amazed British people don't look at the land and think they have any rights to it at all. They don't think, why is that such an enormous big farm and none of us, and there's no vibrant rural community. And I think that's the lesson from Nicaragua, is because they had a successful revolution. And I want to go back to, what Francis said. Of course, there are errors, disasters, mistakes all over the way. But, Nicaragua is learnt by doing, and the poor, the mayors in the cities I've been in Leon was a poor guy from a poor barrio. The leadership, the chiefs of police are people from, poor communities. And of course, everybody makes mistakes, but they learn and they get stronger. And I think that is the lesson. And I think that's what I think they were so frightened of in the Nicaraguan revolution, was an example of when the poor and the disadvantaged come to power, what can be done. And that's something that everywhere in the world, I think, is true.
Okay, well, comrades and friends, I'd like to thank Nick and Becca and Catherine for their contributions. And I'd also like to thank Louise and Rohan, who've been working the levers throughout the Zoom meeting. I think it's been an excellent meeting, and Nicaragua is a great example of what can be achieved through the implementation of a progressive social and economic program which benefits the many rather than the few. And another world is indeed very much possible. And we've got a lot to learn, has been said, from Nicaragua. They've benefited from policies that reject a capitalist view of society and put people before profit. And we need to stand in support of solidarity with the Nicaraguan people, and support by comrades by opposing ongoing US aggression and sanctions, and defending Nicaragua's national sovereignty and the right to determine its own future. It's a wonderful country with wonderful people who only want to live in peace and free from aggression. Now, here's the plug. For those of you who are on the call, and there was quite a few people on it, if you are a trade union member, please make sure that your region and your branch is, and you're not affiliated, please affiliate and consider affiliating to the Nicaragua Solidarity Action Group, and I'd urge you to do so. Details are on the website. It's easily done. You can join the Nicaragua Solidarity campaign as an individual, and again, that we're on the website, and those links have been posted in the chat room. Now, we've recorded the meeting, and we'll be sending around a recording to attendees as soon as we're available. So please feel free to share it with others. A big thanks to Becca and to Nick and Catherine for making their great contributions this evening. As I say, thanks to Rohan and Louise for the technical support, and all of you for the audience for joining in. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening. Thank you very much, and we're now closing the conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Good night.
Bye bye.